Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we try to cut through the noise and get straight to the insights.
Glad to be here.
Today we're diving into something pretty fundamental, really. It's about not just thinking about the future, but actually building it, making a real impact.
That's exactly right. And our mission for this particular deep dive is, well, to get inside the head of Elon Musk, understand his core ideas.
Yeah.
We're using his conversation with Y Combinator as our main source here, looking at what he thinks really matters, how he tackles these huge goals, and, his vision for where humanity should be heading.
Okay, so the source is that interview transcript from the Y Combinator YouTube channel, the one called Elon Musk, How to Build the Future. Let's get into it. Where do we start? Maybe with his idea of what makes work useful.
Yeah, and it's probably not what a lot of people assume. He really pushes back on this idea that your work has to be world-changing, capital W, capital C, to be good work.
Right. That's such a relief, honestly, because there's this immense pressure, isn't there, to do something massive. But Musk says, what? Something different.
He does. He argues that if something offers, quote, high value to people, even if it's just a small amount of good for a large number of people, like, say, making a game slightly better or improving photo sharing, that's still really valuable.
So it's not about the scale of the individual change, but the total benefits spread out.
Exactly. He even sort of frames it with a formula, though maybe formula is too strong a word. He calls it utility delta.
Utility delta.
It's basically the improvement you make over what exists now times the number of people it affects. He talks about it like the area under the curve.
Ah, I see. Like in calculus.
Sort of, yeah. The idea is that a small improvement for, say, 1 billion people can actually add up to more total good than a huge improvement for just a few thousand. It's a different way to think about impact.
That really reframes things. Okay, so that's the general idea of usefulness. But what about the big problems, the ones that maybe do need that massive change focus? He famously had his list back in college.
Right, things like becoming multiplanetary, sustainable energy, the internet, genetics, AI. That was his list then.
But if he were, say, 22 today, what would he focus on? Does this interview tell us?
It does. He narrows it down. And number one, the single biggest item in the near term that he thinks will shape humanity, it's artificial intelligence, AI.
No surprise there, I guess. But what's his angle? Just that it's coming.
Well, yes, but more that it's critical, its arrival happens in a good way. He's very aware it could go wrong, so the focus needs to be on steering it right, proactively.
Okay, so AI is top of the list. What else?
Second, he points to genetics, but specifically solving genetic diseases, things like dementia, Alzheimer's. He talks about the potential for genetic reprogramming to prevent these as being just wonderful.
Tackling the root cause, not just symptoms.
Exactly.
And the third big area.
This one's maybe less obvious. A high bandwidth interface to the brain.
A brain interface. Why is that so crucial right now? Sounds like science fiction.
Well, his argument is that we humans are actually bandwidth limited. Think about how we interact with our digital selves, our computers, phones, all that information.
Okay, yeah. Typing, talking, looking at screens.
Yeah.
It's kind of slow compared to how fast computers process things.
Precisely. He calls that digital part our digital tertiary self. And our connection to it is the bottleneck. He thinks solving that constraint, improving that bandwidth, is very important for the future. It's about unlocking our potential with the tools we've already built.
That's a fascinating way to put it. So for someone listening, maybe an aspiring innovator thinking, how do I apply this? What's the takeaway? What's his advice beyond identifying problems?
Well, he actually downplays the whole, how do I become the next Elon Musk question. He says the next person won't work on the same things anyway. His core advice seems to be simpler. Just try to be useful.
Back to that usefulness idea.
Exactly. And interestingly, when asked about getting PhDs for this goal, his advice is mostly not.
Really? Why not?
He seems to favor a more practical, hands-on, impact-driven approach. Maybe getting bogged down in deep academia isn't always the fastest path to, doing something useful in the world. He advocates for just building things, solving problems directly.
That definitely tracks with his engineering focus. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about risk, fear, progress. Because starting SpaceX, that had to be terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. He calls it very crazy. He even says it felt insane if you were looking for the best risk-adjusted return.
Which he clearly wasn't.
No, his motivation was different. He'd apparently totally come to the conclusion that if rocket technology didn't get radically better, humanity was just going to be stuck on Earth forever. It was about survival, expansion, not profit.
And he wasn't shy about criticizing the established players, was he? The big aerospace companies.
Not at all. He said they had no interest in radical innovation. They were just making old technology slightly better, or sometimes, he argued, even worse.
He points to the moon landing versus the shuttle, right?
Exactly. Saturn V goes to the moon in '69. Decades later, the shuttle only gets to low Earth orbit, and then even that program ends. It's a powerful example of how progress isn't inevitable.
Which ties into this really profound idea he talks about, entropy.
Yes, the battle against entropy. It's this concept that things don't automatically improve. Technology only gets better if, quote, smart people work like crazy to make it better. Otherwise,
It decays. It gets worse.
it actually declines. You have to actively fight to push things forward. It's a constant struggle against things falling apart or being forgotten.
And he uses history to back this up. Ancient Egypt forgetting how to build pyramids.
Or even how to read their own writing, the hieroglyphics. And Rome, same story. They built incredible roads, aqueducts, plumbing.
And then forgot how.
Yeah. So his point is stark. Entropy is not on your side. You can't just assume knowledge or capability will stick around.
That's sobering. How does that connect to dealing with fear, though? Because starting SpaceX, knowing the odds were low, must have involved immense fear.
It's fascinating. He actually admits he feels fear quite strongly. He doesn't pretend to be fearless.
So how does he push through it?
His approach is, if something is important enough and you believe in it enough, then you simply do it in spite of the fear. The importance overrides the fear.
So the mission becomes bigger than the personal feeling of fear.
Right. And he also mentions a kind of fatalism helping. He figured the odds for SpaceX were less than 10% success. For Tesla, extremely low.
Wow. Less than 10%.
Yeah. He basically accepted he'd probably lose everything. But his goal wasn't just personal success, it was to move the ball forward, even if his companies fail.
Hoping someone else could pick it up.
Exactly. Some other company could pick up the baton. That's a different kind of motivation, isn't it? It's about the overall progress, not just his success.
That commitment is incredible. Okay, so that covers risk and entropy. Let's circle back to AI, because that's clearly huge for him. What's his vision for a positive AI future?
Well, first, he's careful to say his ideas are predictive, not prescriptive. It's his best guess at the best of the available alternatives. Not necessarily what he thinks should happen in an ideal world, but the best practical path forward.
Got it. And what is that path?
The core strategy he outlines is the democratization of AI technology.
Democratization.
Yeah.
Meaning making it widely available.
Exactly. He sees concentrating too much AI power in one company or just a small group of entities as very dangerous, a recipe for instability.
Why dangerous? Because the AI itself becomes rogue.
Not necessarily, or at least not right away. His more immediate concern seems to be misused by humans. If super powerful AI exists but only a few control it, the risk of bad actors stealing it or using it maliciously is just too high.
So spreading it out makes it safer, less concentrated risk.
That seems to be the logic. Distribute the power, distribute the risk. And this, he says, was the whole point of creating OpenAI.
Right, the nonprofit structure.
Yeah, 501c3, specifically designed to help democratize AI safely, with a real sense of urgency about minimizing, existential harm.
Okay, so democratization is one part. But then he connects this back to the brain interface idea, doesn't he?
Yeah.
How does that fit?
This is where it gets really interesting. He connects democratization with that high bandwidth interface to the cortex we talked about earlier.
Okay.
He uses this analogy of the human brain itself. You have the cortex, the thinking part, and the limbic system, the more primitive emotional part.
Right, they sometimes disagree, but mostly work together.
Exactly. And he says they work quite well together generally, and nobody wishes they could just get rid of their limbic system, right?
Oh, definitely not.
So his vision is similar for humans and AI. It's not about creating a separate AI entity we have to control. It's about, in his words, effectively merging with AI.
Merging. How?
By using that high bandwidth Neuralink to connect our cortex directly to our digital extension of yourself, your digital self becomes integrated, like the limbic system is integrated with the cortex.
You become an AI-human symbiote.
That's the term he uses, yeah, an AI-human symbiote.
Wow. And how does that solve the control problem?
Well, if this capability is widespread, if anyone who wants it can have it, then his conclusion is we are the AI collectively.
Ah, so there's no single AI entity to be controlled because the intelligence is distributed across humanity itself, amplified.
Precisely. It diffuses the power and integrates AI as an extension of us rather than a separate force. It's a very integrated vision of the future.
That's a lot to take in. It's ambitious, to say the least. Speaking of ambitious, did he give any updates on the Mars colony goal in this interview? That other huge project?
He did, briefly, and he sounded, well, pretty optimistic. He said he's now certain that success is one of the possible outcomes, which is a careful way of saying it, but still.
Certain it's possible now. That's a shift. Any timeline.
He threw out about 10 years, maybe sooner. Even speculated, maybe 9 years.
9 or 10 years for his self-sustaining Mars colony. That's soon.
Very soon.
Yeah.
Of course, he added caveats. SpaceX needs to survive. He needs to survive or have a successor who's just as committed. And he mentioned the first launches would be robotic, partly because of the communication lag. 4 to 20 light minutes to Mars makes real-time control tricky.
Right, the latency issue. Still, that level of confidence is striking. Okay, let's wrap up by looking at the mindset behind all this, the how. How does he actually spend his time making this stuff happen?
It's probably not what most people picture. He said he splits most of his time between SpaceX and Tesla, with maybe half a day a week at OpenAI back then.
Okay, but doing what? Managing, strategy, media.
That's the surprising part. He estimated about 80% of his time is spent on engineering design and developing next-generation product.
80%.
Yeah.
So he's not primarily a CEO in the traditional sense, or a business guy.
He really pushes back on that idea. He sees himself fundamentally as an engineer. There's that story you might have heard about how in the early SpaceX days, he supposedly knew the torque specs for like every bolt on the rocket engine.
Deep in the details.
Very deep. Which leads to another key insight he shared, something he called his biggest epiphany of that year.
Which was?
That the fact the machine that builds the machine is actually harder, maybe at least twice harder, than building the product itself, the vehicle.
The manufacturing is harder than the car or the rocket. Why?
Well, think about the level of automation. He pointed out that existing car factories, like for the Model S or X, were still relatively slow. The assembly line moved at maybe 5 centimeters per second, like really slow.
Okay.
But for the Gigafactory and the high-volume Model 3, his target speed was way higher, at least 1 meter per second.
1 meter per second, that's what, 20 times faster?
Exactly, a 20-fold increase. He compared 1 meter per second to a person walking slowly. So imagine a factory operating at a walking pace, churning out complex machines. The engineering challenge of that, the automated factory itself, is immense. That's where he saw the real difficulty multiplying.
That perspective on manufacturing as the core challenge is fascinating. Okay, what a deep dive this has been. We've gone from defining useful work to the biggest problems like AI and genetics, his philosophy on fear and entropy.
The whole vision for AI democratization through symbiosis, the Mars update, and finally landing on this core identity as an engineer focused on the machine that builds the machine.
It really paints a picture of this blend of almost impossibly grand vision with incredibly detailed hands-on engineering.
It does, and maybe tying it back to that entropy idea, entropy is not on your side, it leaves us with a question, doesn't it, for you listening?
Yeah, what's the takeaway thought?
Given that progress isn't automatic, that things can and do decline if we don't actively push, what advancements, maybe technological, maybe societal, do you feel passionate about? What things do you think are worth fighting to maintain or improve before they potentially slip away?
Something to definitely think about. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.